I'm Lobsang Sangay from Harvard University. I asked a similar question this morning at the European panel. What happens if there's a war in Taiwan or Himalayan region of India or Philippines? And most of the panelists were Europeans, a bit non-committal, so to speak. So I asked the same question, what happens if there's a war over Taiwan? What would Europe do, Australia do, Taiwan do? Because I say this, because I've been to many plenary conferences, where Hong Kongers also got plenary sessions, headline news, but actually when there's a clampdown, nothing happened from Europe or America.
But so the question is, what happens if there's a war, correct?
Yes, unless Taiwan is willing to fight for months, then only the international community is likely to come, following Ukraine model. Is Taiwan willing? Is Australia willing to put boots on the ground? Is NATO willing to come?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Start for me.
Always.
The determination of self-defense is very strong in Taiwan, and it's getting stronger. We will defend ourselves to the very end. And in order for us to be able to defend ourselves, we are engaging in military reform, we are investing more in our defense, and we engage a whole of society resilience. And talking about the critical supply of critical stockpiles of very important matters for us to stockpile, like energy and etc. We are looking at longer term because we want to be able to survive in the longer term. And I think that's the best way for Taiwan to stay resilient and for Taiwan to show itself as willing to defend itself. And you know, when looking at this question, I very often would like to look at it from a different perspective. Knowing that war is going to bring disaster for the international community, look at the war in Ukraine. It's a disaster for the international community. And Taiwan's, if there's a war involving Taiwan, it's going to be much worse than the war in Ukraine. So the critical question is how can we stop war from happening? And I think that is in the mind of many important decision makers, including the decision makers in the United States. The war shouldn't stop, shouldn't happen at all. And we should have the enough strength to deter war from happening.
Thank you. We are very short on time. I don't know if you have any comments, just 30 seconds each in answer to that question, and I will take that last question over there.
Well, I don't want to dodge the question. I think firstly, thank you for acknowledging the other territorial claims and disputes. It's not just about Taiwan, but about Philippines, about Japan, about India, that the PRC does have a number of territorial claims and disputes that could see conflict move in a number of different directions. It is about deterrence, as I've said multiple times. Of course, for deterrence to be effective, people have to believe that you will be willing to use that deterrence as well. Now, that would all depend upon partnerships and how we move together, but we have to make sure, first and foremost, that deterrence is effective to prevent the conflict in the first place.
Has a question on the end. Thank you.
I'm Lobsang Sangay. I'm presently a lecturer at Harvard Law School, but I used to be a Prime Minister of Tibetan government, as some of us know each other. My simple question is, if there is war in Asia, let's say Taiwan or Himalayan region of India or even Philippines, will EU and NATO get involved? Because, when there's war in Ukraine, Europe says this is war of the world. We have to defend democracy and freedom. Now, if there's war in any of the democratic countries, will EU recognize that as war of the world and to defend democracy and freedom? Why I say this is because Teresa said Putin and Xi Jinping gets along very well. The war in Ukraine is sustained primarily because China is supporting in many ways. But then when Macron goes to China and says, oh, Taiwan is America's problem, not European problem, then it flips the narrative that Ukraine war or war in Europe is world war. But war in Asia is not Europe's business.
Okay, let's put that to the panel. Pavel, would you like to take that?
Thank you for your trust. the allusion that you make about the declaration by Emmanuel Macron when he left, was about to leave the Chinese airspace, and he spoke about in these terms, was for me completely unacceptable, shocking, and I was really very much outspoken to demonstrate that this is completely nonsense to repeat red lines imposed by Beijing. I think that this is the worst we could do in Western free world if we keep repeating Chinese red lines without putting on the table our own red lines. This is the pain that we have to deploy in order to understand ourselves first and explain it to our citizens that there are some red lines also for us. And I think that this is the role for our leaders, for our parliaments, to pay attention to this. If we don't, we will only reinforce Beijing point. And Emmanuel Macron unfortunately did this. And concerning your first question, if there is a war, I think that this is so complex, and the responsibility of those who should put it on the vote and decide it with the approval of Parliament is such that we cannot just take it easily. We have to understand what is at stake and what kind of conflict we speak about. Czech Republic is not a maritime power. If you see our capabilities in terms of airlift, we are not. We are relying on a big ones, and then we have to anticipate the huge journey that we have to take together in order to understand what is at stake. But I am sure that we are interconnected. It was my first point. Not only in terms of our prosperity, but also in terms of our security. And this is the reason why we have to pay attention to the condition of Tibet, to the tension around your identity and your future. And this is something that we have to be extremely sensitive to.
Okay, we have 60 seconds left, and we have Natalie and Teresa. You have 30 seconds each. Go.
Thank you for that. I will be very brief,
Okay.
just to echo what Pavel said. I will not defend the words of Emmanuel Macron because I was shocked myself. But France is a maritime power. And at the very moment he had this disappointing speech, the only European vessel cruising in the Taiwan Strait was a French Navy vessel. So for once, our deeds were better than our words.
Teresa.
Okay. Thank you for that excellent question. And this brings up the point about living our values. I mean, you don't put on values like it's a piece of jewelry. And I think the fact that we don't even know what all of Macron said because the Élysée forced the reporters to retract. So he said things that were even worse. And I think Taiwan was so frustrated by this, he had to write a handwritten note, I was told, and it was delivered to Taipei. So I think that this magnifies that Europe does not have a China policy. We have people talking all over the place. We have Macron throwing Taiwan under the bus. And at this conference 2 years ago, it was Indian Prime Minister Jai Shankar who said to an audience that might not have liked to hear it, but he was absolutely right. Europeans think that their problems are all the world's, but anyone else, it's their problem. So I think that Europe really needs to step up and come up with some common threat assessment. I know it's always the lowest common denominator of 27 EU member states, and you have Hungary, who is very pro-China, pro-Russia. You have problems with Slovakia now. We're seeing a really fragmented strategic landscape, and this is China's dream. So if we want to see a European response, China, it was great. They had this spy case with Kreilman, a Belgian retired senator, and it said right there on the phone, our job, we're trying to break the transatlantic alliance. So that's China's #1 strategy, to drive a wedge. And so it's hard, but it's like herding cats all the time. So I think that the stakes are extremely high, and you know, VW has a plant right next to camps in Xinjiang. How is that living your values? Even people who were German employees would not sign off on the audit. They said, this is wrong, what we're doing here. So we need more people to stand up for that and not just look at financial issues, but also to see the bigger picture and not just what's going on in their own neighborhood. And I think this pointed out like how Japan wanted to have this like NATO office, but all it would have been like some pamphlets and a laptop. And they had one in Moscow, for heaven's sake. And who banned that? Macron. So he was in Xi Jinping's force field, and man, that guy had a big influence on him. And you should go online and see the video that Macron's people created after his visit. It was like high-stepping, beautiful Chinese PLA soldiers, and it was like the weirdest video. So I just think he had a very distorted view, and I think his idea is the third way, you know, we'll come up with a third way. But this is the idea constantly of trying to divide Europe. And who speaks more about strategic autonomy more than Macron? Xi Jinping. It's his favorite go-to phrase. So let's get our act together, let's put our money where it should be, and we're gonna have to make some hard and tough decisions and pull together, and don't let China and Russia divide us further.
And that's where we conclude our panel. Please put your hands together for our wonderful panelists this morning.